Hello students, in this video lecture I am going to discuss a very important and very interesting poem written by Nissim Ezekiel, a famous Indian English poet. Now, when you read the biography of Nissim Ezekiel, this point actually is very significant in this context because you're going to study many other poems where he describes Bombay, the squalor of Bombay, the prosperity of Bombay. So he was born in Bombay in 1924 in a Jewish family, and he was aware of the fact that he was born in a Jewish family and he is an alien to the native Hindu culture. In most of the poems, he celebrates this kind of theme actually. There is always search for identity in his poems. But the most important point is that though he is making search for his identity, but the most important point is that he is very much connected to India. The poem background casually tells about the struggle of the poet for the identity in a country where he as well as his community, that is Jews, is considered to be an alien, foreigner. This poem is you can say the capsule biography of the poet. It was published in Hymns in Darkness in 1976. And you'll find out the confessional and autobiographical elements in this poem. Background casually means casual description of the background of the poet. Background casually. So we have the points which are related to the life of the poet. The poem is divided into 3 sections, and each section covers one part of his life. The first section covers the period from his birth to the completion of his university education. Second section deals with poet's stay in London and then his return to India. And third section deals with his commitment to stay in India. The last section, very significant, and there is a single line which covers the entire theme of the poem and the Indianness of the poet. That is there in the third part. My backward place is where I am. So in this poem you'll find out a few pages from the personal diary of Nissim Ezekiel. As I have just told you, it's a capsule biography prepared by the poet casually, and that is why background, casually. It is written from a detached, point of view, but we have some typical characteristics of Nissim Ezekiel. We have self-mockery, we have irony in most of the lines of the poem. let us now start the poem. You please open your text, and I will explain the poem stanza wise. I'll tell you the basic points and also some literary elements which are found in the stanza. So let us now start the poem. So here begins the poem, the first part of the poem, background casually. Now, when you read the poem, as I have just told you that the poem describes the background of the poet. Now, this is the first part of the poem. And it begins with a poet, rascal, clown was born. Now, the poem begins in a tone of light banter in third person. And a poet, rascal, clown, it's an example of self-mockery. The frightened child who would not eat or sleep, a boy of meager bone. He never learned to fly a kite, his borrowed top refused to spin. The poet rascal, as you'll find out there is a reference to Ezekiel's later life when he became a poet. But he says poet, rascal, clown. Meager bone means very weak in health. Skeleton of bones. So he says that, a poet, rascal, clown was born. The frightened child would not eat or sleep. Now, a frightened child means timid, a person who, lacked self-confidence. So this child was frightened in the sense that, I was lacking, self-confidence. Appetite and sleep also. I was very, weakling. He could never, because this poem, this stanza in third person, he could never learn to fly a kite. And his borrowed top refused to spin. Maybe sometimes he borrowed the top of somebody, but he was not able to spin it properly. So what you find here in this stanza, that this is autobiography in capsule. And he describes the poor quality of his childhood days. And as I told you that this poet, rascal, clown is an example of, self-mockery. And he considers himself a clown because perhaps he was not able to fly a kite or spin a top like the other children of his age. Coming to next stanza, I went to Roman Catholic school. Roman Catholic school, these Christian schools which are run by Christian missionaries. A mugging Jew among the wolves. Mugging Jew. It's silly. Fool. Wolves here in the sense of Christian boys in the school. So I was a very fool, silly, simpleton, among the Christian boys. Now they told me, the first person, they told me I had killed the Christ. You see, he says that, in the school, I was a simple Jew and I found myself among the cruel Christian boys. And they means these Christian boys, Christian boys. These Christian boys actually who bullied me Because I belong to the Jewish community. That Jewish community which is supposed to have killed Christ. They told me I had killed the Christ. And that year I won the Scripture Prize. Scripture Prize, a prize awarded for the knowledge of the Holy Bible. That year I won a prize for my knowledge of the Holy Bible. Again here, mugging Jew. In the first stanza you have found out poet, rascal, clown. And here you find mugging Jew. Again an example of self-mockery. Now, the poet, who is supposed to be the non-believer actually, here in this line you'll find out irony. They told me I had killed the Christ, and I, a person who is supposed to be the non-believer in Christianity, I was awarded the Scripture Prize. So this is an example of irony. A Muslim sportsman boxed my ears. I mean, he's describing his childhood days. That is, Muslim sportsman gave me a blow on my ears. And from that very moment, I grew in terror of the strong. I developed a sense of terror of the muscle man. And immediately he said that, but undernourished Hindu lads, underfed. Their propositions always wrong repelled me by passivity. Repelled caused a feeling of dislike. Passivity is the disinterest. Now, I disliked the underfed Hindu boys. Their propositions were always wrong. Those, Hindu boys who always made mistakes in the use of their prepositions. At this point, you can think that why such kind of, line like, the wrong use of prepositions and all that. But, by using such kind of lines, Ezekiel is trying to create humor. And this is actually the style of, Ezekiel, that he tries to juxtapose two unrelated items. So by juxtaposing the unrelated items, he is trying to create humor in these lines. One noisy day, I used a knife. There was a day actually, a day of disturbance. It was a day of disturbance. I used a knife. I attacked someone with a knife. And what happens, and you must have seen several times, in different families, that how, senior members of the family say that the child is spoiling himself. He is misdirected. So one noisy day I used a knife, and that very day at home on Friday nights, the prayers were said. At home, the prayers were offered on Friday night because it was said that my morals had declined. My morals had declined in that they had fallen from the ethical standards and the laws of morality. That I have forgotten all the morals and ethics. I heard of yoga. Hindu system of meditation. Zen, form of Buddhism. Could I perhaps be Rabbi Saint? rabbi saint, teacher of Jewish law. He said that, I was just looking for my place. That do I belong to this place? Means, can I become can I go for Hindu system of meditation and self-control? Can I follow this form of Buddhism? Can I be a teacher of Jewish law? The more I searched, the less I found. The more I tried to search where I belonged, the more confused I found myself. I told you in the beginning that this poem is a great example of Ezekiel's search for identity. The poet finds himself in a state of dilemma, that what to do. And this is expressed here in this line: the more I searched, the less I found. Now, 22. He is now 22-year-old. He says that I attained 22. Time to go abroad. It was the right time to go to the foreign country. But my condition was not very good actually. It was not very sound. First the decision, then a friend to pay the fare, money for the travel. First I took the decision to go abroad, and then I found a friend to pay for the travel. And philosophy, poverty, and poetry, 3 companions shared my basement room. He says I shared the basement room with my 3 friends: philosophy, poverty, and poetry. What he wants to say is that, that he lived in London in the conditions of poverty, and he was deprived of, the enjoyments of the fashionable society. The London season passed me by. The London season. What is this London seasons? The period of stay in London. Passed me by means paid no attention towards me. He said my stay in London was not very pleasant. I lay in bed 2 years alone. He said I lived there all alone for 2 years. And then a woman came to tell my willing ears I was the son of man. Then a woman came to whisper into my receptive ears to make me aware that I must have a wife. I knew that I had failed. He says, I knew that until then I had failed to realize the urge of my flesh. What he wants to say is that he makes clear his dissatisfaction with his life in London. And apart from that, he also confesses that he felt the urge of love for a female partner when he was 22. He knew that he was the son of a man, and therefore, as a man, he must also have a son. So this here ends, the first part of the poem. Coming to the second part, is in everything a bitter thought. In everything. In everything means in every experience. A bitter thought. Unpleasant feeling. Unpleasant feeling. So means as my life in London was very unpleasant. Therefore, in an English cargo ship taking French guns and mortal cells to Indochina, what happened? He says, I decided to return home. I was not having money. So he said, I boarded an English cargo ship carrying French, guns and mortal shells, arms to Indochina, scrubbed the decks. This is something which is significant. Cleaned, cleaned the decks. Cleaned the decks for money. Because I was not having the money. And this line is very significant. Learn to laugh again at home. Back home, I once again recovered my choice. He describes, in this stanza that he has a very bitter thought of his life in poverty in London. And when he comes back to India, he learns to laugh again at home. Now, how to feel at home was the point. Some reading had been done. When you come back to your home, then you enjoy, you do plenty of things, you meet many people. How to feel at home was the point. Some reading had been done. But what had I observed except my own exasperation? Exasperation means dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. What had I observed? All Hindus are like that, my father used to say. My father said that, oh my child, all Hindu lads are like that. What was happening and what was disturbing him? When someone talked too loudly or knocked at the door like the devil, they hogged and spat. They sprawled around. What is the meaning of hogged here? Those hawkers who loudly pronounce their goods for sale from door to door. This was spitting, sprawl, to lay with arms and legs loosely spread out. It happens. It is there in India that somebody is coming and pushing the call bell and disturbing you. So what is here in this stanza? Ezekiel seems to be torn between two kinds of values. Conflict between Western values and Indian background is found here. In this stanza, you will find out his strong dislike against the unpolished and unsophisticated habits of Indian peasants. These are, very unsophisticated, unpolished habits. Talking too loudly, knocking at the door like the devil, and all these points which he has described. I prepared for the worst, married, changed jobs, and saw myself a fool. The song of my experience sung, I knew that all was yet to sing. So having sung the song of my life experiences, I knew that better songs were yet to be sung. And so, prepared for the worst, married, changed jobs, and saw myself a fool. He said, I tried many jobs, but found myself misfit. And immediately, he started recalling the business of his ancestors. He said, my ancestors among the castes were aliens, crushing seed for, this was the business actually. His forefathers, ancestors, crushing seed for bread. Crushing of oil seeds as their profession. He said, this was the profession of my ancestors. coming to part 3, when the part 2 ends with some discussion on his ancestors, and then the beginning of part 3 continues. He continues the discussion on the ancestors. He said, one among them means one of my ancestors fought and taught a major bearing British arms. He says one of my forefathers was a major in the British forces, who fought as well as gave tuitions. He told my father sad stories of Boer War. This was war actually between the British forces and Dutch colonists in South Africa. I dreamed that fierce looking men, had bound my feet and hands. Now he narrated some horrifying tales of Boer War to my father. And you found in the beginning that, Nissim Ezekiel was a very frightened child. So I dreamed that fierce man had bound my feet and hands, because my mind was the mind of a tender child. Now, the later dreams were all of words. What you have seen in this previous stanza, that, with a sense of pride, Ezekiel tells about his forefathers' roots in Israel and the positions they held on their, migration to India. And he also tells in this stanza the psychic effect of horrifying scenes on the tender mind of a child. Now, coming to this, the later dreams were all of words. I did not know that words betray, but let the poems come, and lost that grip on things the worldly prize. I would not suffer that again. He says that the dreams that I had in my later life were all of poetry. I had never known that words would, beyond their usual use in communication, help me compose poems. Now my desire for material objects, most prized by people with practical approach to life, is lost. I would never in my life like to be a victim of such a desire. What you find here is that he emphasizes the power of words. And through these lines, you'll find out that he decides to choose poetry as his vocation. Now, I look about me now and try to formulate a plainer view. I look about me now, I examine carefully and formulate, develop a plainer view, a simple view. The wise survive and serve to play the fool, to cash in on the inner and the outer storms. He says, I examine all about me and my experiences and try to develop and formulate a very simple approach to life. He said, those who are wise survive themselves and continue to serve. The wise survive and serve to play the fool. They play the fool and make poetry out of their conflicts with the self and also with the world around. What Ezekiel says here, that Ezekiel justifies his choice of his vocation as a poet. And he also defines the role of the wise and also suggests a clue to the different themes of his poems. Now, you see in the next stanza, the Indian landscape sears my eyes. Sears. I have become a part of it. Sears. Fascinates. Attracts. The Indian landscape sears my eyes. I have become a part of it. to be observed by foreigners. They say that I am singular. I am singular. Singular means unlike other Indians. Their letters overstate the case. Overstate the case means exaggerate my estimation. He says the landscape, the Indian landscape fascinates me very much. To the foreigners who have seen me closely, I am singular, for I have become a part of the merits and demerits of my Indian surrounding. And when they, write letters to me, they make an exaggerated statement about me. Now, this line, I have become part of it. It echoes Tennyson's Ulysses. And Tennyson's Ulysses says, I am a part of all that I have met. Now, coming to the last stanza, I have made, and this is very significant, and here lies the crux of the poem. I have made my commitments now. I have made my final commitment. I have pledged. I have taken a firm decision. I have promised to myself. I have made my commitments now. This is one, and this is the commitment. And what is the commitment? To stay where I am. I will stay where I am. The pledge is that I will never, forever, that I will never leave this country. I will forever live in my country, that is India. As others choose to give themselves in some remote and backward place. Backward place is here like, African countries. Remote, far off land. Maybe, others are choosing the backward places like African countries. My backward place is where I am. My backward place is where I am living now, that is India. And I shall never part from it. I am part and parcel of it. I will never part from it. And this shows the great Indianness of the poet, that he wants to stay in India. So this is the poem of Nissim. Here ends the poem. This is the poem of Nissim Ezekiel, where you will find out his Indianness. He wants to stay in India. He does not want to, leave India. Others may leave, but he will not leave it. In this poem, he has made the best use of self-mockery, irony, satire, humor. So all these points are there. He also mocks at his father. Not exactly that, but you'll find out the reference of his, father, that how, the stories were narrated to him and how he was just like, terrified that. So you'll find out in background casually that India is the only place where he can get joys of life. Thank you very much.